had just turned 30. I was working as a juvenile probation officer. Um, I was married. Had a little 3-year-old girl. I was training for my second marathon. I was playing ultimate frisbee, and I'd been living in Austin for a while, just trying to accept the fact that I'd officially gotten old and turned 30. And I was at a coworker's birthday party on the 5th of November of 2010. I always say, remember the 5th of November. And all of a sudden I couldn't read the menu. And that's the last thing I remember. And apparently a little while later, I woke up and there's an EMT above me. And she says, "You had a grand mal seizure. We need to go to the hospital." I'm like, "You need to calm down." She's like, "That's like the 4th or 5th time we've had this conversation." And we would get in the ambulance finally. I finally conceded. And it was the most expensive taxi ride of my life. It was 2 miles. And but then we got there, and the ER doctor said most people will, about a fifth of the human population will have a seizure at some point in their life. I didn't know that. But a huge percentage of them, we don't find out why, because it's just a one-time occurrence. It may be heat exhaustion or just something misfires. But we're going to do a CAT scan and see what we can figure out. I'm like, okay. At that time, between kindergarten and college, I had missed 5 days of school for the chicken pox. In the entirety of my work career, I started working when I was full-time since I was 14. I had never called in sick. And so I thought maybe it was just some kind of injury. I didn't know what it would be. But after the CAT scan, they come in, they're like, "Well, something is showing. We're going to do an MRI." And I'm like, okay. And it hadn't quite hit me yet. And we do the MRI and we get back, and a doctor goes, "Well, something is showing in your MRI. We're going to need to admit you." And my best friend had been there earlier, but he had left to go get my car because they told me I wasn't going to be able to drive it, and we'd coordinated somebody driving my car home. And when they told me that I had an IV in my arm, I ripped it out and I walked out of the hospital. And he happened to be coming back in. He's like, "Where are you going?" He's like, I'm leaving." And he's like, "Did they say you could leave?" I'm like, "No, but I'm leaving." And he walked me back in. And then they admitted me. This had all started over lunch, and by the time I got through all these tests and proper hospital room, it was like five-ish. But I wouldn't get to see a neurosurgeon until about 9 o'clock that night. And he shows me the MRI, and he says, "I think you have some kind of brain tumor. I don't know what it is, but I think it's some kind of brain tumor." And he looks at the MRI, and I'm like, "Well, rub some dirt in it, man." And he looks at me, and he looks back at the MRI, and he looks at me. He's like, "And if you look here," he didn't know what to say. And unfortunately, because this was a Friday afternoon, he said, "This isn't considered an emergency procedure, so we can't do the biopsy till Monday." I'm like, "Well, can I leave and just come back Monday?" And somebody explained that it would be more expensive because of 2 different hospital admissions and because I had to stay in the hospital. So Saturday, I just sat around. Friends came by. We played some board games. We played a poker game. So by Sunday, I was tired of just sitting around, and so I asked the doctor if I could go running, and he says, "Well, nobody's ever asked that before." And he's like, "I'm going to have to check." And he made arrangements to where I was supposed to just stay on the hospital grounds. And it was a huge block and run around. And I had a friend who was an EMT who was going to run with me. And there was a nurse at the front. And we were supposed to check in after every turn around the block. After a couple of times, I'm like, we're going to be out here a while. You can go back in. We've got a cell phone with us. He's an EMT. And I think she was bored just sitting there. So she went back up. And as soon as she did, I actually ran off the hospital ground. And, unless my insurance is listening, then I was at the hospital the whole time. And the we would cover the beginning of the Austin Marathon course, and he didn't know I was going to. He's like, "What are you doing?" But he stayed with me, and we got back, and I got some advice. It was a biopsy, and what was said was that as brain surgery goes, this is minor. There's no such thing as minor brain surgery. So the biopsy happened right before Veterans Day, and then I got out of the hospital the day after Veterans Day. Somehow there was some confusion, so I ended up being there an extra day longer than I was supposed to. And the results were supposed to take just a few days, but they sent them to Johns Hopkins for second opinion, and then the neurosurgeon only had office days once a week. And on the day I was supposed to go get them from him, they took the staples out, but the doctor had been called in for an emergency surgery, and the nurse assistant, I'm not sure, the person at the office said, I can't give you the results. I'm like, you have them? She's like, yes, but the doctor has to be the one who tells you that. And because it was around Thanksgiving, it would be the better part of a month before I'd get the biopsy results. And so that was no fun. I kept joking around that, well, the suspense is killing me, but if something's killing me, it's probably not the suspense. So when the results finally came in, they told me I had brain cancer, grade 2 diffuse astrocytoma, and that it was in my left temporal lobe near the memory and language centers. And we were going to do some more tests to explore what the options were.